Good morning. Sustainability and mobility. Not the first time, third time we're talking about it at this conference alone. It is not the first conference we talk about it. We still believe that it is so important that we go through this. I don't know if any of you in this room have actually already gone through the latest MIM sustainability in mobility at the Euro Academy. That's how much we are valuing this subject. I believe from Dom that we've had a nice sign up already. And thank you for everybody who contributed to that. Sustainability. So we put together this panel of great experts, experts in the sense that they've actually been doing the development path towards sustainability, because you do not become sustainable in one day. It is a long-term commitment, and everybody here has been dedicating a lot of time and efforts towards a better and more sustainable world. I would just like to do a very, very brief thank you, Minnie. When we talk about sustainability, we always see these 17 squares. Of these 17 squares, I believe only 4 of them actually relate to environment. So that's how much sustainability is so much more than being here for a better planet. With us, we all know each other, but I'll still do my presentations. We will have, I'll start with people on stage. So Jesse Van Sass from FIDI, Jeremy Berthoux from Home USA, Robert Baldwin from Pack Impacts, Renee Stegman, Relocations Africa, and Vidak Glavinic from Dwellworks. And live on Zoom, we have the pleasure of having Paul Barnes from IG Mobility. Thank you, Paul, for joining us via Zoom. We're very sorry you can't be here, but you are live. And Paul was an absolute wonder in the sustainability module at the Euro Academy. And I must say you are a real expert, Paul. So we are starting with you. And how about we talked that sustainability is above all things a mindset, right? And so what do we mean by sustainability in the global mobility industry? Because we really want to get specific in what each one of us can do in our own business, and enough of theory and a bit more of what your questions are. Where do I start? I have started and I've stumbled upon a question, and I will have a mic and try to keep track of time with these guys here on stage to make sure that we do have a little bit of time for you to ask them all the questions you've always wanted to ask and you haven't had the opportunity yet. Paul, over to you for a general introduction on such a passionate theme, and what is this mindset above all things that needs to be changed in the myriad of regulations and habits that we all have in our day-to-day lives?
Yeah, thank you, Isabel, and thank you so much to Euro for allowing me to join by Zoom. Apologies that I can't be there in person, but great to join such an amazing panel here this morning. You mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, and if we look at those for a moment, that there are 17 of them, and it seems quite easy, but then if you actually look behind them, there's 169 targets, and suddenly it starts getting complicated. And this is a good introduction just to how complex sustainability can be and how wide-ranging it is. There's the UN Global Compact, which is a reporting that companies actually do. They align themselves to 10 principles. Now, the principles are on human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. So there is some differences with the SDGs, but what companies are doing is sign up and support the UN Global Compact. They can either be a signatory or they can be a participant. Some RMCs are members and have been members for many, many years. I feel that more and more are actually joining this. And then they're aligning themselves to the Sustainable Development Goals. Many are choosing core goals or goals of focus. So rather than the whole 17, support the whole 17. but actually look at them and which ones can your company, depending what it does, what can it actually have meaningful impact on? But you can't impact on all of them. And we all know to start small, keep it simple is really the best thing to actually do. The great thing about sustainability and mindset change, and I've had my mindset changed over the last 12 months particularly, is I come from an environmental and then a social impact, but I'm more into climate change, emissions, waste, reducing plastics. But they have interconnectivity. If I want to help somebody reduce their plastic use, then I'm also interested in people that are actually at the end of the life cycle of plastic, who are actually picking it off of dumps around the world and actually living on those dumps. So there's a huge issue there with their poverty, with the social impact, the environment that they actually live in as well. So it's great that Renee is here, because one of the things with sustainability, to truly move it forwards, we need to listen and understand from each other. We need to understand different people's views, where they're living in the world, and the local restrictions that they actually have, and what they can actually do to actually understand what actions we can take that will be meaningful on a global basis. Otherwise, we have a very linear view, and if we're not careful, we end up with lots of unintended consequences. People don't buy into the actions, the initiatives that have been started, and then things dwindle out and don't have the impact. So I love what the associations are doing, what EURA, FIDI, Omni, IAM, ERC are all collaborating, and they're actually, in my mind, starting a common movement, a common purpose there for sustainability. And what that is actually doing is making people feel comfortable to actually join that movement and actually start taking actions, whether it's seen as a small action or a big action. Everyone is very, very important, but it's giving the opportunity for people to actually join, not to feel left out of this, and actually feel part of the program. So I have to congratulate all the associations for the amazing work they've done. Nobody has just run off and taken a shotgun approach to this. Everybody has been very mindful and actually building this up. So I think the industry is in a far better place than it was even 8-10 months ago. And I think the future for the whole relocation industry is actually looking very, very positive when you look at sustainability. A lot still to do, but I think it's been an amazing start, and what's planned coming next is absolutely fantastic as well.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for that very nice introduction. I'll take your words of listening to each other and congratulating this collaboration between associations to pass it over to Jesse. Jesse, FIDI, we know you've also been very active and concerned about it, and let us have your thoughts.
Well, we're all concerned, obviously, with what's happening, and thanks, Paul, for giving that fantastic introduction. And I just referred to a session we saw yesterday, Bursting Bubbles, about radical collaboration. I think this is what we need to do. One of the big issues we have right now is that sustainability is a complex matter. It's not about movers, it's not about DSP or temp housing, or about RMC or customers. We're all connected to each other somehow. And that's something that we need to bear in mind, because once you realize that, then you realize that a radical collaboration is going to be required in order to achieve the goals that we all have in mind right now. And there's a huge pressure on all of us on sustainability, whether it comes from the political side, from your customers, from my own children giving me pressure to do something about it. And yesterday I saw another session where they were looking at motives for business leaders to become more sustainable. And the main motives were the customers telling us to do it, or the government is telling us to do it, or maybe your staff is telling you to do it. The thing I missed there is because you have an inner drive to change something. This is the strongest motivation you can imagine, if you personally believe in that sustainable future somehow. And this is something that we all need to work on. So that pressure is there, and that's fantastic. We have the complexity as well at the same time. What is missing still today, I think, is a lack of education. Lack of awareness for how to do this in practice. We all see fantastic statements in big corporations, statements on sustainability. Politicians are doing the same thing, big statements. How do you translate that into real actions for your sector, for whatever you represent. And I represent the movers here right now. And we're trying to do that, Isabel, by for example, creating guidelines for our movers. It's something we published about 6 months ago, very practical guidelines on how you can become more sustainable. Now, this is something that movers, DSP companies all around the world, the whole supply chain is working towards to. That's what we call bottom-up. They're going from there, they're starting doing little things. At the same time, there has to be a top-down as well. So the business leaders need to be convinced of this. The associations, EURA, FIDI, needs to be convinced, and we all need to work together somehow in order to achieve that. So I think we're getting to a roadmap. We're starting the first sketches of a roadmap, but we're not there yet. Still a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Jesse. Well, speaking of roadmaps, Jeremy, you're one of the most recent DSPs to have gone through this roadmap. And can you tell us briefly how you, well, first of all, committed to it and how you reached where you are now?
Well, I committed to it, and my motivation was my child. I have a 2.5-year-old, and that really made me realize the importance of going sustainable. Only to realize that the road ahead was so big, it was a daunting task. But I guess, echoing to what you said, Jesse, we can all have an impact, a really meaningful impact on our own, perimeter, and that's what I did during COVID. Actually, it was a good time to focus on yourself, focus on your company and how you can change things. So I embarked on the journey, and really, I only to realize it was a big journey ahead. I found a partner in France that enabled me to first off, calculate the carbon output of our company, and then go into solving mode. So first off, offsetting, but then much more. Importantly, focusing on reducing rather than offsetting our carbon output. And this is only a small part of the equation, but well, it's a kind of a journey.
Start.
Yeah, it's a start. That's it.
It's
exactly.
a great start. Thank you. Robert, you've not started today. Packing Pegs was an actual innovator and leader, and how you worried about this. So you standing for such a long commitment. Can you give us a little bit of your story?
Yeah, it was 2011 that obviously
Wow.
the decision starts a long time before you get. We've seen CO2 neutral since 2011, but I think the motivational points that you were both saying. My son told me the other day, nobody should drive a car bigger than a Volkswagen Golf, which I obviously did my best to argue my case, but then I did have to stop and think that there's probably a certain amount of logic in that as well. It's actually interesting when we think about sustainability. Young people don't want to join a company that isn't doing something about sustainability.
Employer branding.
So, maybe that's the part of sustainability. We can't actually recruit anybody, and I think everybody's challenged with that at the moment. Really the beginning of the process and the continuation of that, the last 6 years, we've gone from 4.4 tons per FTE down to 1.3. Commuting is a calculation factor, and Home Office has helped with that reduction. But it's got to be a passion that you live in every way. I spent a bit of time in Scotland, and they've got 4 bins, dustbins, trash cans, whatever you would like to call them, at the end of the road. The 3 big ones are recycling, and the smallest one, and it is for stuff you can't recycle, and on the top of it says, "This goes into Scotland."
Yes, and I'll just.
It's a real mindset on that one for all of us. But the journey is continuous. We have to look at everything. The important thing is that however you measure, you do it the same every year. Because there's nothing that motivates like improvement. It really does energize you to keep going. Yeah, let's do more. So we've got green ambassadors and recycling bins everywhere. We got rid of copy capsules. There's a whole host of things that we continue to do and to try and reduce that number.
And reduce that. I'll just have 1 minute between passing over to Renee, which is a story we had. I was in Japan in 2019, and I visited Japan's first zero-waste town because I could not believe there was a town who had actually implemented recycling into 45 different categories. It all started with them reducing the cost, because it always starts with, does it hit your pocket, right? Does it come out of your pocket? And it was coming out of their pocket a new incinerator. And so the mayor of that little town asked, should we spend more money in the new incinerator, or would you actually like to start separating yourselves, and then we can save that money? And change is always difficult. Of course, it wasn't a one-day step. But the truth of the matter is they are the world's first zero waste town, literally, because every Tuesday and Thursday, they'd say, they go to this warehouse, and it's a village with older people. So it became also a social it became a community thing. It became a social event for these elder people. And they just spend the whole morning there separating into 45 different categories. Again, it must also be financially viable, and it's not only a concept. And what they do is they resell already recycled. So they're doing the job of the recycling companies. But it's not only about saving money, it's also about social values, as Paul was also saying. In one of the interviews with Renee and Paul that I was re-listening to yesterday, Renee, you were talking about the social element of the SDGs in our businesses, and how we should be working with suppliers with the same values and paying right and fair. And there's so much more. There's so much to it. We could stay here for hours, but can you just briefly go over these?
So actually, I think we all hear the urgency of reducing our carbon footprint. And I think because of COP26 and other motivation, all of us are focusing on probably the most urgent matter, which is to reduce the Earth planet's temperature to a maximum of 1.5 degrees. I recently went to Rwanda, and the most impressive thing in Rwanda for me was there's not one piece of plastic anywhere. So a lot of Africa are already sort of emphasizing, the importance of the carbon reduction, the waste reduction. But what was visibly evident was the poverty, no infrastructure. And so Africa is a very undeveloped, generally across the continent. And so us as businesses, we feel it's more urgent for us to concentrate on some of the social issues. So in our business, we try and look at internship programs to encourage those who don't get the advantage of getting jobs or being educated to come in our business, be educated, so they've got a better opportunity at getting jobs. Our unemployment rate is really big in South Africa, and so for us, that is an important leverage. There are other examples from social issues. I was talking to Vidak about the greenest hotel in Africa. And what they've done, not only huge infrastructure projects in terms of looking at how they can become sustainable in terms of the recycling and solar power and those sorts of things. But the project I loved the most was they got grade 11, which is just the year before you finish school in South Africa, to decorate their entire hotel with their art. And the hotel owner paid them for their art. And with that, they were able to go and go into tertiary education. So, I think, we need to be mindful as businesses that, yes, the carbon agenda is the urgent agenda, but the social issues cannot be left behind, and it's all very integrated.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Renee. Vidak, there was a whole session about sustainability in corporate housing on Tuesday. Not all of us had the chance to attend, so can you wrap it up in 2 or 3 minutes for us?
So
from the corporate housing perspective?
So that currently there's no universal standard for sustainability in corporate housing for us as a community to organize our efforts and commitments around. But there's an ongoing collaboration, and I think we're going to hear this word on and on again as we go through the day. And it's spearheaded by CHPA in US and ASAP here in EMEA. There's a gathering of different stakeholders, work groups that meet as an open forum with the aim of developing a resource library, recommendations of practices that are going to be relevant to the goals, workable and measurable. And yeah, the idea is that us as a community are going to find a kind of common pathway to sustainability. And yeah, I think the progress has been made already, but it's early stages. Us as an organization, Dwellworks, you probably know it as a destination services provider, but Dwellworks Living is a brand that provides corporate housing solutions globally by partnering with local operators. And we see that as an opportunity for both advocacy and action.
But do you see, for example, clients choosing, if you do promote that a certain unit has energy by solar panel energy, do you already see this happening every day, where they would choose a unit with a sustainable energy source rather than the standard one?
Yeah, so I think
Is the public already responding? Is this something that you already see in buyers?
Well, we think, yeah, the RMCs and corporates, the sustainability has already topped their agenda for supplier qualification and selection. I think, day to day, I don't think it's still a differentiator on a case-by-case basis. But it's kind of, the consensus is that it's going to be something that's going to be as essential as health and safety, which wasn't always the thing, right? I remember the time when it was something that you kind of had to adopt.
Had to do.
Yeah, and it wasn't, integrated into our daily processes. I mean, in many cases, so.
Jesse.
But I can see it happening already, and it's the customer who decides in the end. And the customer can be the RMC or the corporate customer. In the end, it's the assignee, the public, who will decide. If you look at Booking.com right now, if young people book on Booking.com, they will look for sustainable housing. Mm-hmm. Because they got a perfect brand next to it. So this is a sign that it's going there, we're going that way. And to what you said about the universal standard for measuring carbon footprint, that's our issue. We don't have a universal standard, not in temp housing or corporate housing, not in moving that anywhere. And what happens then is it's the Wild West out there. There's so many companies right now offering their services to everyone in the supply chain, saying, we can measure your carbon footprint. And of course, very conveniently, they will give you an offer as well to offset it at the same time. And this is our issue that we have right now. It's the Wild West out there. Nobody can make anything out of it anymore. And it's all different benchmarks. So how will the corporate customer ever decide who is greenest if we all measure in a different way? And again, coming back, we need to collaborate on this, because otherwise it's going to go berserk.
That reminds me of the APIs in technology. Oh my God.
Oh yeah. Oh, video callbacks.
That's rough.
I just want to say that, if we sit and wait for alignment, yeah, quite frankly, you just got to get on with it.
Yeah, you're right. It's true.
Can we have Paul back, Minnie, please? Paul.
Yeah.
This is the time where we are going to deliver what we promised, which is giving actual examples in our mobility industry and for the audience here. Let's get more specific with examples, everyday examples, so then we can ask what the burning questions are.
Yeah, thanks, Isabel. And I think, what Robert and Jesse have started discussing is fantastic, because there's slightly different views, but everybody wants to do this. But, Robert is of the view, let's go on with this. We can sit around all day, but we've got to do something. And Jesse, let's take our time and not rush into this. And I can see it because, Robert, you're an individual company. Jesse, you're whatever you put forward, hundreds of companies will do. One thing, speaking to lots of destination service providers, movers, that I picked up on over the last 12 months is everybody wants to do something. They have it on their agenda, but they're crazy busy. Everybody's running a business. They don't have the time to stop. And as you said, Jesse, it's the Wild West. You look at ESG reporting and you think the big corporations, this is amazing what they're doing. But now people are finding that's the Wild West. They're all doing whatever they want to do. But to your point, Robert, we have to do something. And this is where I think people should look at the greenhouse gas protocol. They should look at the scopes 1, 2, 3 emissions. And the reason for that is because this is terminology that people are going to be talking about. They're talking about it already. The corporations use this terminology. It's floating down into the industry. And if you understand what you're talking about, you will then be able to identify what are the key emission sources that you actually need to go after and you actually need to look at. Scope 3 is a big one. It includes company supply chains, and people think that's all it is, but there's 15 elements in there. Travel is in there as well, so that's a biggie. The other thing I would look at personally is the circular economy. And the circular economy is basically breaking the link between economic growth and waste. But it looks at historically what we've done is we've taken finite resources and we've actually designed things with a limited life. We've used them for even less than they were designed for, and then we threw them away. So the circular economy is all about how can we actually reuse and keep something purposeful and extend its life to the highest value possible. And that comes back to the design phase. So I think if you look at the basics of the circular economy and have that mindset when you're planning anything, a policy, a new design of it could be a removal truck or a box or anything you're doing, it will make sure that you're aware of all of your global stakeholders, the different applications they may use, whatever you're doing for, and you actually design in value for every stakeholder. And if you do that, and it's hard, but if you go with a mindset of that, it will actually be very impactful, and it will actually, your initiative will have greater impact with people and spread across more people. The other key thing I think, which the associations are doing, and people like Robert and everybody else there is doing, is sharing and openly sharing. The one thing I would say, and this is more to the RMCs, I'm not sure if there's any in the audience, but just be careful. Whenever you do something, get away from your commercial mindset. You know, new technology is going to come along, new advances are going to come along, which will move the whole of mobility forwards. And at the moment, I just think the RMCs are looking commercially, and some people are keeping that for themselves. They're not making it open source, but just build in, you can share, you can still make money and have a huge commercial success. But sustainability is about the sharing, the collaboration, the wider sharing of that knowledge for all. And I think if that doesn't happen, it would be a great shame. And I see one or two instances where that's not happening, which is a real shame. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you, Isabel.
We will go once back to collaboration and how important this is. I just wanted to give a specific example of what you were talking about in circular economy. I don't know if you know that the plastic bag was invented by a Swedish gentleman who invented the plastic bag because he was thinking of zero waste, and plastic nowadays is such a huge, you know, everybody's, oh, horrible plastic, horrible plastic. Well, a plastic bag was invented to be foldable in a very small and put it in your pocket, and then you would reuse and reuse and reuse and reuse. That's how the plastic bag was firstly invented. Well, I'm sure, I think he's passed away now, but he must be very happy of the victim of the success of his invention.
Yeah. Isabel, just a quick one, but cellulose, the early plastic, was actually invented to replace ivory.
To replace,
you know, so
to replace what? Sorry.
Cellulose, which was the early plastic, was actually invented to replace ivory because the amount of elephants that were getting killed. So somebody came up, they were making combs and all sorts of things out of ivory and elephant tusks, etc. So they invented cellulose, which was where, you know, the start of plastic basically came from, which is a little bizarre.
It is. We are exactly halfway through our session, and I do want to keep our promise. We have lots to talk about, but is there anyone who has a very practical burning question on sustainability in mobility that you would like to? It doesn't matter if it is, where do I start? As a DSP, what should I ask from my moving supplier, or how can I implement this from a social perspective? I'm a corporate housing provider. Is there anybody who has a burning question that, you know, now is your opportunity to actually have a conversation with the panel of experts? No? Well, we have, while you think about your next question, we have some more. Challenges in the supply chain. Shall we go on about that, Jesse?
We all want to be sustainable. And sometimes you have corporate customers telling their supply chain that you have to be sustainable, whatever that means, or zero carbon neutral by 2 years, whatever that means again. And they impose that on the supply chain. I think these are issues that we're all dealing with today. The question, of course, is who's going to pay for that? And that's something that is usually on the back burner somewhere, so nobody wants to talk about it. We did talk about it. We had a meeting in Cannes during our conference, and Euro was there as well as all the other associations. And we invited RMCs as representative of corporate customers, and other rep from the 39 Club was there. And we asked that question as well, who's going to pay for it? And for the first time, and I'm seeing a shift in focus here, we heard the RMC jointly saying it has to be passed on to the customer somehow. In the past, it was always you got to absorb that into your own cost, but now they said, well, you know, it's considerable, so you have to pass it on to your customer. Because it's easy to say that you'll be sustainable or carbon neutral in a couple of years' time, if at the same time your business goes down because you can't afford it anymore. So it needs to be financially viable as well, and you used that word earlier. And ESG is important here, and our own famed quality brand is focusing on ESG, environmental, yes, social, definitely, governance as well, because it needs to be financially viable. There's no point in becoming zero in 2 years' time if you go bust afterwards. There's no point in doing that. So we have to pass on that cost somehow to your customers. They have to be part of that as well, I think.
Yes, it's a mindset, like Jeremy was saying, it starts in your own home. And once it starts in your own home, then it really has, and then it goes on to the company and it goes up the supply chain in this case. But
it's not always a cost. Sometimes you can involve your customer as well. And I'll just give an example from our moving industry. I was brought up as a mover almost, and the one thing you offer to your customer was a single container for their shipment. One single container for their shipment. No other shipments involved in that because, you know, that can't be done. I've got my own shipment and it's going in one container and that way it's safe. And sometimes that container would be half full. So you would ship a half empty container to the other side of the world. That doesn't make any sense. So you have to involve your customer as well at a certain time and go back to them and say, look, if you want to be part of that sustainable journey we have, because it's a journey, it's not something that you reach in a couple of days or a couple of years' time, well, become involved as well. Maybe we should change the policy a little bit to allow for sustainable solutions. Again, it's not usually done in our industry. We just do what the customer tells us to do. But sometimes you have to confront them and tell them, hey, be part of this journey. And because funny enough, their scope 3, their supply chain, is our scope 1. It's very complex. We're all connected with each other. There's no point. Our scope 3 is our supply chain from the movers. It's the packers, the truckers, etc. So it's all connected somehow, so we have to chip in.
yes,
Just to add, I think generally, you know, we talk about the price point and how we can pass it on. What I've noticed is if I want to book accommodation that is more sustainable, authentically sustainable, I pay a lot more money to go and book accommodation that's more sustainable. So I think the reality is, if we truly believe in what we're doing, it will cost more. But perhaps what we need to do as DSPs, immigration, temporary housing, is give the client the options. And actually, if the client has an option to choose a sustainable option versus an unsustainable option, it might be showing their colors in terms of what they're choosing. So you say, oh, you're going for the unsustainable option. Okay, interesting. So it's something we have to start doing. We have to change the way we position ourselves as businesses in terms of giving them the options.
and yeah, and when what is not measured is not always possible, right? So, Robert, I know you have a list of measurables that you can share with us. Just going back to going back to Jesse and the definition, you know, scope 1, 2, 3, if any of you are familiar with these expressions. Generally speaking, scope 1 and 2 emissions are electricity, gas, you know, you put solar panels in your house or in your corporate housing units, and scope 3 is precisely business, what you do in your business, how you recycle waste, or how you go to everything you do towards zero waste, or what is globally referred to as net zero, right? List of measurables. How can we measure what we do, and I know you've been.
You could count the number of plastic bags you have in the boot of your car. That's the starting point. You know, if you've got too many in there, you probably shouldn't be buying another one. If I go shopping and I actually get to the checkout and realize that I forgot to bring my bag because it's in the boot of the car, I make myself do several trips backwards and forwards. And you're talking about the cost of the environmental side. Levi sell a pair of jeans now that are made out of old plastic bottles. I have to say they're very comfortable and quite have a little bit. They're quite good.
I promised you'd wear them.
They have. I did, and I forgot them. They're a little bit thick for the climate, actually, but they expand as well a little bit, so they're probably quite well suited. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously you need, I would say, a certain degree of professional guidance when you're starting to say what can you measure. But it's surprising how much information we already have. You know, so we're a DSP. Well, we roughly, you know, we're compensating consultants, or we have our own cars, so we know how much fuel we're buying, or we know we can create an average for what is the average length of a journey for a tour. You know how much paper you're buying, hopefully not a lot. You know where you're buying it from. You look at your heating system. Now we actually have, in some ways, a unique opportunity to look at office space. And I'm sure everybody's kind of looking at that going, do I really need an office? Or, you know, home working has. I mean, now we've got Paul sitting, I think he's in Singapore. And I know we don't like virtual conferences, and everybody's very pleased to be back, but, you know. So I think there are a lot of measurables or easy measurables, but don't be scared. Again, if we do nothing, don't be scared to start measuring. You've already got a lot of information. And what you don't have, the good news is there are companies that will, you know, you give them some information, they create an estimate.
Jeremy, you recurred to one of those companies, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that was essential in getting a sense of everything. Because Jesse, you're right. It's the Far West out there. So it was actually the longest part of the process. It was to source a suitable partner to do that for us, to understand and to measure all scopes. Because we discovered during the calculation of our carbon footprint that most of our carbon emissions sit with our local consultants on the ground. I kind of knew it already, but it was a good confirmation to have. And Robert, you're absolutely right. We should act. We should not wait for the call for action to come from above. We should do something. So what we did starting this year, we've actually paying a bonus to our consultants if they're not using a thermal car.
Oh, wow.
So that's our cost today. But I'm very pleased to hear that RMCs want this cost to be passed on to them.
Don't take my word.
Yeah, no. I'm here. You can come and we can discuss that absolutely. And Renee, I'm absolutely on board with your idea. I mean, giving them an option, having a net zero service line and a normal service line that's destined to disappear in a few years. That's absolutely a great plan of action. So there is no general charter to do that for each company, each industry. So individual action at every level should be the driving force for this change, from my opinion.
But you actually got a certificate.
Yes, absolutely.
In the sense that you actually measured it.
Yes.
And show for it.
We measured it and we offset it as well. One of the big sourcing points that I had was to find a company that measured it but didn't sell the offsetting, because obviously they would have a vested interest in measuring it upwards, perhaps, and also echoing what René said, proposing action and offsetting options with social resonance, because I'm absolutely sure that it should be a combined action, both environmental and social. It's not going to work one without the other.
Vidak, do you think in corporate housing you're ready to give that option to customers? Because we've been insisting on this is a mindset, and it starts with us, not only as suppliers but also as customers ourselves. And this was René was saying, giving the actual option to the customer, and it's difficult to say, hello customer, do you want the sustainable option or do you want the unsustainable option? So that's a good start. Is corporate housing ready for that?
So I think yes. We for our ESG impact report earlier this year, we surveyed our network, and 74% of our suppliers, partners, have some kind of a greenhouse gas emissions reduction program And not only that, but the programs reflect other areas affected by corporate housing activity. So yeah, there's already a substantial number of operators who have embraced and integrated sustainable practices into the operations, into the value systems.
And are they more expensive or the same price? Or can they be sold at the same rate, or is there the cost that needs also to be shared with the clients?
So typically, yeah, there's no pattern, there's no correlation between the price and how and attitudes to sustainability. So, I know some operators who are the most enlightened and who have made most advancement and formalization of their efforts, who are actually very economical. So it doesn't always translate into price. Yeah.
Can we have Paul, Minnie? Just Paul. I have to bring the elephant in the room in regards to precisely the word greenwashing and offsetting. Can you just elaborate just a little bit on what they mean and how at the same time they are absolutely important, this offset that Jeremy was talking about, but a word I've been hearing, I've been listening to, which is greenwashing, which sounds like not such a good idea, but we need it at the same time.
If I talk a little bit about carbon offsetting, and then perhaps if I could defer to Renee, because she does greenwashing amazingly. But carbon offsetting, everybody is around. If you're okay on that, Renee, but I know you're very passionate like me about greenwashing. But so carbon offsetting, everybody wants to plant a tree, but a tree won't mature for at least 10 years to take meaningful CO2 out of the air. So people are moving more to environmental social impacts and actually protecting what we have, restoring natural habitats. But there's a lot of amazing carbon offsetting out there that will actually work with local people, perhaps in Africa or Latin America or Asia, to actually protect their habitat, stop the loggers from actually cutting down what we have, these trees that some of them are thousands of years old. So it's not just, you cut a tree down, you've stopped it absorbing all that CO2, but what you're also doing is releasing a huge amount of emissions from that tree, because a lot of it ends up getting burnt. Emissions can come out of the ground as well. And it's actually soil degradation. And the amount of soil in the world over the next 10 years that it is basically will be useless is huge. And a lot of this actually comes from deforestation, human beings moving into areas and basically ripping out the natural trees and the habitat that is there. So that you can do a huge social environmental work with this. And I would urge people, don't pay the extra £5 to offset your flight. Make a note of what your emissions are, keep it in a little bucket and do something yourself at the end of the year. Spend all that money on a project that's actually meaningful to you. But Renee, what do you reckon about greenwashing? Sorry.
Well, I'm an advocate against people who greenwash. Absolutely. Because I think actually the long term of greenwashing is our reputational risk. And that is a bigger risk for all of our businesses. And I'd say to people, if you're not started your journey in sustainable development, don't say you have, rather be honest and say that I'm wanting to start it. A lot of people, and I've heard conversations about they're not sure exactly where to put the sustainable development champion within their businesses. And some are putting it in marketing now. It kind of makes sense because you want to tell your clients what you are doing. But just be careful, we need to be rather being practical about it. We will need the leadership involved to make sure that we're being impactful, because ultimately, if you're not being impactful. So I had a story about someone who did, I think it was their 1401 ISO standard, and he said, so I'm all fine, I'm good to go. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. What actually did you change in your business? He goes, oh, nothing, but I've got the certificate. So I was like, well, you've done nothing, but if that makes you feel good, great, good luck for that. But the problem is that we've all spoken about the Great Resignation, talent shortage, talent acquisition. You're not going to get the talent coming into your organizations, wanting to stay in your organizations if you're not actually genuinely impacting the social agenda or the environmental agenda. And just on that, and to Paul's point, there are so many apps. I think B1G1 is a website you can go to, and you can literally buy education tokens for various projects on Africa, India, and all over the world. And I think in the corporate housing section, I'm sure there's a resource there that someone mentioned for us to be able to easily contribute back to projects if we don't have ideas ourselves. But yeah, absolutely. I think greenwashing is a big danger for us, and I think we should call people out for it as well, actually, to say, because it's not appropriate. We need to be authentic in what we deliver.
Isabel, if I may, offsetting is almost becoming a dirty word. Right? It's almost similar to greenwashing nowadays, but it is a tool that you can use temporarily. Yeah. It can't be a goal in itself to offset. The goal must be to reduce your carbon footprint by taking own actions, by reducing your pollution somehow. And as you go on that journey, because again, it is a journey you're going to, you will not go to zero from day one. In the beginning, you do the offset of the part that you can't reduce yet. But you got to have that journey in front of you, that roadmap and that target to reduce it by a significant number. And as you do that, on the way, you will reduce your offsetting year after year. And then it's no longer a dirty word. It's a very useful tool that you have, but it cannot be a goal in itself.
But it's more about the mindset. It's also about certificates and measurables, but also about this mindset and collaboration. And just going back to Renée's point, there's nothing wrong with making a profit. That's why we're all company business owners. But as being sustainable is making a profit while you are contributing to society, is paying right and fair. And that's where the word collaboration keeps coming up. Because it really has to go around. We're not talking about, it's back in the days we were talking about corporate social responsibility. And this is being sustainable in our businesses is corporate social responsibility too. We are 10 minutes and I will ask one more time. Anybody who's doing something already that you'd like to share the example? Who's thinking about a reason for which you are in this room, but you don't know where to start? Anybody who's had a different experience? Anybody who's tried and just thought it was such a long way ahead that you said, okay, I'll get to it a bit later? No experiences?
Everyone's shy.
Reason for which you are here? Yes, Susan.
Inspired by his daughter, is sustainability passionate and recognizing, as Robert said, alignment is great, but misalignment may be the reality right now. So by having an ecosystem that is judgment-free and recognizing that many of us may know what we don't know. And to Jesse's point is to continue to leverage education, build a common lexicon where we all feel like there's a common thread through what we can learn, building in metrics to measure what we're doing, but again, recognizing or establishing that judgment-free zone. So if one person is at one point or one organization is further along, that's okay. It's really recognizing the common bond, which is the collaboration, the ecosystem, and the mindset. I also could recommend, and Paul, you're aware of it because we had the pleasure of co-hosting a Euro briefing on the circular economy, is you might want to take a look at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, where you will find a lot of great resources and information, and then you can cherry pick what's realistic and practical for you at home and you at work.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for bringing the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They've been doing just an amazing job in terms of circular economy, and it's passionate. It's fascinating, and and we keep coming back to education, right? So education, and educating ourselves towards this. I have 1 minute for a big wrap up each. Should we, Dom? Can you call in Paul, or ask Minnie to call in for Paul? Paul, would you have famous last words just for the session?
Ooh. Yeah, I'm with everybody. It's about education, it's about patience, it's about understanding. But at the end of the day, to Robert's point, we've got to do something. People have to do something. So, even starting small, perhaps you put your waste, your recycling out every day. Go and get some scales like the fishermen have, and just measure every day, every week, how much waste, how much recycling have you got? You start the mentality. about measuring something. It's visible. You can share it with your colleagues. And then it starts to change people's mindsets. When you've got something that's visible, it's why a lot of people in the Western world are not good at recycling until recent times, because we weren't living next to the tips that some people were around the world, basically next to all of our waste. So yeah, just make things visible. But yeah, that's all I'd say. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Jesse.
Famous last words. Thanks, Paul. And to also what you said, Robert. I totally believe indeed that we all should do something, and it's fantastic that some of us have started on that journey already. That's great. I come from an association point of view, and I think we should work together as associations, and we're doing that already. And that's the really good news that I have already for all of you, that the associations are working together on this, together with RMCs as well, so with the corporate customers as well, to see how we can come to kind of common definitions, a common roadmap on how we get to sustainable efforts. Jura and FIDI are working together, or starting to work together on education as well of our members in respect of sustainability. Is something that will follow in the next few months, and you will see that happening. And I am also pleased to tell you that there will be a next meeting, a next round table of those associations, along with the RMCs, in October, end of October, in the US most likely, where we'll talk further on how we can come to that common definition, that common roadmap. And again, it's to serve you all. So if you all work from your perspective, from your supply chain perspective, to do something, and meanwhile associations are working from another perspective, but that's just as important, and together we'll get that journey started somehow.
Thank you. Vidak, advice for corporate housing providers and buyers.
Yeah, well, I just want to echo the sentiment about the need for collaboration, for cohesive kind of and honest embrace of the goals and the cause. And I'm hoping that the spirit of collaboration is going to lead to a space where we're not actually competing against each other on sustainability, but kind of joining hands and pulling all in a kind of same direction. So I'm hoping that differentiator is going to be you're either on board and incorporated sustainability into your day-to-day practices, because we all have a different footprint, we all have different business models, and our potential for impacting people and the planet is different. Therefore, I'm hoping that, yeah, this is going to lead to...
A game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeremy, your experience was really, really good. You had time for it during COVID. You've got a certificate. What's next for you?
Well, it's only the start of the journey. I mean,
Hence, what's next?
yeah, for myself, for the industry. So what's next is, as Jesse said earlier, really focusing on reducing emissions rather than just offsetting. That's just a means, not an end. The end is to be able to look at myself in the mirror at the end of the day, at the end of the year, the decade, and say to my daughter, yeah, well,
I've done something.
I've done something. The world is still there. Obviously, there's much more left to be done, but I've done a little bit my part.
We are only here to look after the world for the next generation, right? And if we have that mindset straight, then it just changes the way we do everything we do. Renee, social values are so important. I really wanted to, not only get a little bit out of this offsetting in greenwashing, which is absolutely important because it's what we can do and what is more visible. Getting paid right and fair and billable time is not sustainable. The corporate social responsibility we talked about, and now we can just say it's sustainability general. So as in our everyday lives and everything you've been experiencing, because you've come a long way too, what would your final advice, assuming that people in the room are here because they are interested in at least starting the journey?
Well, actually, you said one word in there, which was your everyday life. So I think, as businesses, we can't just sort of go along tunnel vision with our marketing department heading up sustainable development. We need to actually try and educate our team, and as There was a lovely story actually at the FIDI conference of a woman who was telling me how her son is trying to earn pocket money by reducing their electricity and water bill. So basically he went round every time she was in the shower and said, Mom, get out the shower, enough now. We have to save some water, I need pocket money. And the same with electricity. And I said to her, that's really interesting. Why don't you bring that concept into your business? And she was like, wow, actually, that's not a bad idea. So I think the reality is we need to be conscious at home. We need to educate ourselves to be more conscious consumers. And then hopefully those ideas will bleed through the organization. I think another very important thing in organizations is to have a sustainable accountability partner. Someone who keeps you honest and keeps you from greenwashing and doing things that are authentic. So that would be my suggestions.
Robert, you've come a long way, the longest way at Packinvex, what you have already new changes to grow that change? Is that change just keeping it is already fantastic?
Yeah, the message is exactly the same, isn't it? It continues in the journey, but you need the buy-in of all your staff. You need to create energy from within. Of course, the leadership need to set an example, but also you really need that buy-in. You talked about the recruitment challenge, how are we going to be appealing? Because it seems that young people live at home longer with their parents. Maybe the parents are more tolerant than my parents were. But if you want to get them in the workplace, they're going to wait for the right sort of like-minded organization. I guess my message is, let's stop hoping and let's start doing.
Absolutely. We had some shocking images to show, but I think we don't need that. I think people are very well aware. I would, on behalf of Europe, insist on this sustainability in mobility. So because it does refer to very specific examples on what we can do. There's so much information out there, generally speaking. Paul Barnes is a great specialist with all of these. As you can reach out to any of us at any given time, and do go for the sustainability module at the Euro Academy, because this is something we truly believe in, and there is indeed no planet B, as my daughter goes to some street manifests. And so there's these charts saying there is indeed no planet B. And I also truly believe we're only here to look after the planet for the next generation. These are very generic words, but as we've seen, if we do change little by little, we will get somewhere. You do, oh, wow, we have one last question within 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Marie-Hélène Mondy, French relocation Eniter, and I fully agree with everything. On the business point of view, what we face, we say to the team, okay, you have to reduce emails every day, and they laugh because they answer me, okay, so when you have clients asking you to answer within 2 hours, all the times, how you manage it? Because you have to answer, so you have several mails every day, when we all know that one would be enough. This is for DSP. For immigration, we have to exchange many emails with heavy documents inside. All the time, this is the same. When we do visit as DSP, this is the same. We do not take the car, this is not good. But when we do with public transport, this is not fair. So this is really difficult. So as Jessie said, we have to go step by step, and we have to involve all the time clients because they do not understand. If you are not on action all the time, they say, oh, okay, but you do not answer. It's not fair enough. Yes, but how we can manage that? Yes. This is really complicated every day. Jeremy, we do not do the footprint. I know it will be the same as yours, but how do we manage every day with the clients, with the SNE or the companies, to be sure that we are on the right way for us, for our children, but on the other side, to answer the clients and to give them the answer they want and the results they want from us.
Yeah, you were right pointing out, just even in immigration, right? We send emails with thousands of megabytes each email, and there's where Paul was talking about design. being at the source of helping all of this. And I would just add the technology part. Technology can also help us do this more. Well, thank you.
Just to respond to that, educate ourselves, obviously, our staff, but educate your customers as well. And that is the longest and hardest journey you can have, but you got to involve them somehow because they have goals as well on sustainability. Their scope 3 is your scope 1. So you can go back to them and say, hey guys, if you want to perform on your scope 3, we got to work together here somehow. And I understand it's not going to be easy and it will be a long journey.
Can I just add quickly is that I went back to a client in RMC and I actually said to them, you know, we're spending 15 hours a month on reporting to you. Could you tell me that you're actually reading all of these reports and all of this information? And if you are, we'll continue to do that, but we're going to actually assign costs based on certain reporting. They came back, they cut their reporting from 15 hours to 4 hours. So what I would suggest is consistently go back to your clients. If you are, as your business, looking at efficiencies within your organization and you see how much time you're spending, non-billable time, I've started looking at us as almost like a EY type practice or law practice. Every hour is billable. This information hunt, we've been told again how important information is for these RMCs, for their clients. There's a certain amount that we can give you for free. If you want more, we're going to have to charge. I cannot assign my consultants consistently to do free work. I'm not going to be sustainable into the future.
That's a fantastic example. Thank you all.